Hello, everyone. Welcome to Intergeo Industry Talks 2021. I am founder of Surveying Engineering Company, and I have two special guests today. First of all, Mr. Jeff Zeiss from Between the Poles and Mr. Alec Pesto, founder of CEO VGIS. We are going to talk about BIM for infrastructures. Over the past decades, when we look at the digitalization of the construction process, it is difficult to understand complex project sites from 2D data. With the development of hardware and the software technologies, we can analyze the data in the field and office in a much more understandable way through 3D data. With this rapid progress in technology, more realistic 3D data bring us different opportunity and vision. It seems that the developing technology in the near future will open many different doors for us. So it's really exciting topics. Let's go ahead, and first of all, I would like to welcome my guests. Welcome all.
Thank you.
Thank you, glad to be here.
Let's starting Mr. Jeff Zeiss. Would you give brief information about yourself, please, Mr. Jeff Zeiss?
Yeah, I'm based in Canada. I've been following building information modeling, BIM, in the construction industry for a long time. I used to work at Autodesk, which is the guys who manufacture Revit. But since then, I have had a blog, which is called Between the Poles. And I've literally, for about 25 years, followed what's happening with respect to underground infrastructure. And if you're familiar with the trillions of dollars that's going into infrastructure over the next 20, 30 years, you know that we have to be efficient, and you know that the construction industry has a real problem with productivity. And I want to talk today about the effect of improving data about underground infrastructure, knowing where it is, and the impact on construction productivity.
Thank you. Mr. Alec Pesto, would you give brief information about yourself, please?
I am founder and CEO of VGIS. VGIS is the company that produces the most advanced augmented reality solution for construction and for municipalities, utilities. Using our system, municipalities, utilities, construction companies visualize subsurface infrastructure, visualize proposed designs, visualize 3D scans with up to a centimeter level accuracy in the field. So my area of expertise is really visualization component of BIM and GIS. We have a lot of experience in the field, understanding where the industry is heading from deploying such tools. So my main objective today is to cover everything that we see in the industry and the changes that it's undergoing right now.
Thank you very much. I will turn back to Jeff, and would you tell us about your works and the projects a little bit deeply?
Yeah, I think that one of the I think there's some key trends that are happening in the industry, construction industry. Clearly, there's an effort to improve productivity. And the interesting thing is that there is, where a lot of infrastructure was actually paid for by governments in the past, since around 2003, there has been significant investment from private sources. And that would be pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, insurance companies, and so on. There's about over $60 trillion there, not all going into infrastructure, but a significant proportion of that is going into infrastructure. That's one big trend. The other trend is that construction, if you look at the R&D investment as a percentage of the $10 trillion contribution of construction to the world's GDP, the R&D investment is down there with hunting. I mean, it is being poor, and the result is that there has really been no productivity improvement in construction over the last 40 years. But that's changing. The amount of VC, that's venture capital investment, now going into construction startups and existing companies is really growing, and it's much higher than VC investment in other sectors. So something is happening. So something is really happening with respect to money going into construction. The other thing I'll mention is that if you look specifically at underground infrastructure, the fact that in most countries we don't know where it is, the impact is that in many countries, the biggest source of delays in major construction projects, civil engineering construction projects, highways, railways, and so on, the biggest source is not knowing where underground utilities are. It introduces significant risk, holds up project, requires additional budget. So that's one thing. The other thing is that it leads to injuries to workers and the public. And these are significant. They're on the order with the number of people who are killed, for example, in civil aviation accidents. And it is a major drag on the economy. In the US economy, it's estimated that it's somewhere between $33 billion annually. Maybe 50, maybe $100 billion annually as a drag on the US economy. And one thing to bear in mind is that we do have in North America, we do have what are called one-call centers. And we have a large locate industry, and it's estimated that over $10 billion is spent every year trying to find things. And often that data is not stored and it's not shared. So I think that just sort of outlines what the challenges are and what some of the really interesting things that are happening now with respect to investment in construction.
Thank you very much. Mr. Alec Pesto, would you tell us about your solutions and projects, please?
I would actually second most of the things that Jeff just said. We approach our overview from two different angles. So Jeff has a very good bird's eye view. He has a very good understanding of the industry trends. While we are approaching it from the bottom up, we can see individual technologies and adoptions of those technologies, and we can extrapolate trends from the technology adoption. So what we've seen a few years ago when it comes to visualization technology and BIM and utilizing subsurface utility data, it was mostly an innovation type of projects. So our clients, our company started back in 2016, and the first couple of years we struggled explaining why companies need to do it. Then around 2018, we see a lot more traction, but it was mostly a curiosity thing. Construction companies, including global giants, they invested a little bit in innovation projects just to see if visualization technologies can help them in any way. Fast forwarding to 2021, we do see industry changing because most of our projects right now are targeting scaling up. So we are not at the point where every company is scaling up and deploying visualization tech and advanced ways of accessing BIM information on site. So they don't deploy it at scale, but what we see as a general trend is pretty much every company we're working with tries to develop ways of scaling up in the nearest future. So most of our projects right now around developing procedures, around developing processes, making sure that we address personal safety issues when using visualization technologies, because there are a lot of problems with wearing HoloLens, for example, or using iPad while you're on a construction site. So what we are working with right now is how do we scale it up? So that's the main emphasis. And we see it not from one company, not from two, but we see it all across the industry. And to me, it confirms the observation Jeff made that there is a definite change in the industry. So industry understands that utilization of BIM data is the future. Tools that will help you access BIM data in the field and utilize it in different ways is the future. And it's no longer an innovation area. It's something that the industry puts a huge emphasis on. And it's just a matter of time before technologies such as what we provide, which is augmented reality for construction sites, will become a mainstream in the AEC.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn back to Mr. Jeff Seiss, and my question is, what are the hardest challenges to the integration of the BIM methods to the infrastructure in the field? And do you have any idea to overcome the challenge that you mentioned?
Yes, to make it really simple, I think the biggest challenge that BIM can help us address in this industry, I call it low-hanging fruit. If we want to improve construction productivity, we have to look for something we can do rapidly and quick. And because of technology like Alex's VGIS and other I mean, it seems like every 2 months there's a new technology. It may have to do with detecting underground infrastructure, you know, like putting a magnetometer on a drone, for example. It may be using satellite imagery to map underground infrastructure. There's a number of new technologies that are coming, and you know, augmented reality is really going to be key to this. And I know that Alex's company has done a study where they showed the advantages from a point of view of how fast you can do underground locates of having augmented reality. So I think the big things that are changing is, first of all, there is growing public awareness of the problem. And that means that in certain jurisdictions, and I'll mention Colorado, I'll mention Montana, I'll mention Singapore, I'll mention the UK, that has resulted in legislation and regulations. And I think that to solve this problem, we have to have government involved. I think just a purely private solution is not going to work, because it's something that everybody has to do. In other words, all the network operators, the MOTs, DOTs, transportation agencies, contractors, the locate industry have to be involved in this solution. And I'll give you one statistic that may highlight it for you, and that is that the number of these underground damage incidents in the United States every year is somewhere between 500,000 and 800,000. Okay. In Japan, it is 134, and I'm not leaving off any zeros, right? In other words, it shows that something can be done. Now, the United States, every state and every province in Canada has got what's called a one-call center, but the statistics show that that is not leading to a decrease in damage. In fact, if you prorate it to the amount of construction activity, it's actually growing. So I think the key thing is, first of all, new technologies, and they are really coming at a rapid rate, like Alex's company, for example. Second thing is legislation, government involvement, legislation and regulation. And we need to have everybody involved in this thing. We can't say, well, we're just telling the contractors to do this, or we're just telling the utilities to do this, or we're just telling the MOTs, DOTs to do this.
Thank you very much for explanation. I would like to ask the same question to Mr. Alex Pesto. Do you need to, say again the question? Do you remember?
Yes, if you could recap it, it will help to make sure that we organize our thoughts around that, and we answer the question you asked, not the question we want to answer.
Let me say, what are the hardest challenge to the integration of the BIM methods to the infrastructure in the field? And do you have any idea to overcome the challenge that you mentioned?
For us, the hardest challenge comes from connecting those who understand where the industry is heading to those who actually use technology in the field. AEC industry, for at least our company, is probably the best to target because the cost of mistakes is extremely high, cost of delays is extremely high, and cost of labor is relatively high. What we discovered about augmented reality in general is that there is a direct link between cost of labor, cost of mistakes, and the willingness of industries and companies to adopt it. That's why we're facing challenges in some countries with lower GDP, simply because it's cheaper to substitute technology with hiring extra people. Whether in North America, Europe, Australia, Singapore, it's a lot more expensive to hire an extra person. It's much cheaper to improve productivity by deploying tools. So the hardest challenge for us from that perspective is that the industry understands where it's heading. The industry understands that they need to utilize subsurface engineering in a different way. They need to deploy every tool possible to avoid damages, they avoid delays and so forth. Making sure that rank and file employees understand the same thing and closing that gap between the office and the field is probably the biggest challenge. So developing processes that are scalable, that will be something that we'll be working on for the next few years. So the main idea is that demographics of the industry, the fact that many experienced workers in the field, they are close to retirement age. That plays a role. That hinders sometimes adoption of new tools. Then explaining why somebody needs to use something they didn't use before to make their job faster, easier, and safer. That's the challenge too. And one thing is to understand that at the corporate level, when the VP level, director level individuals understand that they need to implement it. Another one is to convince the person in the field to adapt to the changes and then start deploying new tools. So that's the biggest challenge that we see at the moment, just closing that gap.
Thank you very much for explanation. Mr. Jeff Zeiss, another question is, would you please share your insight about the near future of BIM for infrastructure?
Yes, I agree absolutely with what Alex said. We really do need to have a discussion between people who are working on policy on one hand and practitioners in the field. You can see this at conferences. You'll go and you'll see that things that are oriented towards policy isn't of particular interest to the practitioners. And some of the talks that are oriented to practitioners, how to get better value out of my EM device, for example, or ground penetrating radar, or whatever technology I'm using, including VGIS, that often doesn't interest the policy folks. So I think, as I said before, there is no silver bullet for this problem. Right? And I think Alex would agree is that you can use augmented reality, but you have to have good data. In other words, if you're showing garbage, augmented reality will not solve that problem. But if you have good data, augmented reality lets you get a lot of value out of that data, much more value than you get from just looking at a paper map. So that, I think, is one thing. The second thing is that I think there is accelerating awareness among the public. And I think government has to be, this is the theme of there's no silver bubble. Government has to be involved in this thing. So we need to have this discussion that Alex has highlighted between practitioners in the field and policy. And we have to figure out, how we can organize things. Like in the UK, for example, there's something called the National Underground Asset Register that's actually going forward right now to have a national database of underground infrastructure and to work on improving that. Singapore is doing something very similar. And in North America, probably Colorado is the best example because they have mandated, first of all, accurate as-builts. Right? In other words, a good BIM model after you build something. And secondly, doing a SU survey, which is a subsurface utility engineering survey, again, to help create an accurate BIM model of the underground. So I think the key is we have to have all these players understanding how building information modeling can contribute to creating a model of underground that can be open, available to everybody, contractors, utility operators, departments of transportation, ministries of transportation, and that everybody, all the stakeholders in construction have to be involved in this effort.
Thank you very much. Mr. Alec Pesto, would you please share your insights about the near future of BIM for infrastructure, please?
And it looks like I'm on mute.
No, we can hear you.
No,
you can hear. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Okay. So it's a wrong icon on my desktop. So the nearest future of the BIM for infrastructure, the way we see it, we see a general trend of utilizing tools, authoring tools that allow you to bring all the models in one place. 2-3 years ago, utilization of tools such as Autodesk BIM 360, which was recently renamed to Autodesk Build, and Bentley iTwin services, Esri, ArcGIS. So tools like that, it was more of an experiment. And when we talk to somebody about, let's say, storing data in scene services in ArcGIS, the value of that was not clearly understood by many. Right now, we see an accelerating trend of storing BIM data in centralized repositories instead of passing files around. And it makes it a little bit easier for us because as we integrate with Autodesk Build, with Bentley iTwin services, we support Esri, then you have a single place where all the different models go in. And then you can display it on different devices, including augmented reality. So the nearest future of BIM, we see utilizing more streamlined workflows, because one of the industry trends is that nobody wants to have a tool that sits by itself. So right now, the value of any new technology is when you integrate it with an existing workflow. And the general trend is to start storing information in centralized repositories, utilize BIM 360 or build iTwin services in much more comprehensive way for different projects. And then tools need to fit naturally into that workflow so that you don't spend time converting models into something that can be viewed on iPad, into models that can be viewed for AR. So the system needs to adapt to what the industry currently uses. So the trend is centralization of information in one repository, and then improving workflows that remove administrative overheads.
Thank you very much. My last question is for both of you. What do you think the industries will be affected by this big change?
You want me to start?
Please, Mr. Jeff.
Yeah, I think once we have the legislation, technology, including augmented reality to actually provide accurate data to contractors, to the locate industry, to utility operators, that we're going to find a dramatic improvement in on-time delivery of construction projects. I would say that is going to be the biggest benefit. It's also going to contribute to the effort to make construction productivity improve. And that's kind of the longer term. I mean, I see this as, the improving underground data as the low-hanging fruit. It's something we know how to do it. You can look at Heathrow Airport, you can look at Japan, you can look at what's going on in the UK, you can look at what's going on in Singapore, in Colorado, Montana. We have jurisdictions who are moving forward on this, and we've already seen some improved statistics in those jurisdictions. So I think we know how to do it. But once we have that, we're going to see a dramatic improvement, as I said, in on-time delivery of construction projects, and also in reducing the cost of construction projects.
Thank you very much. Mr. Oleg Pasto.
I will repeat what Jeff said. So I think the biggest effect will be a reduction of delays, reduction of mistakes, and increased productivity. So we see all the tools, 3D scanning, GPR, everything coming together. And once that seamless workflow is built, it's very easy to begin consuming data through different means, including virtual reality in the office, augmented reality in the field. What we see in the nearest future for the industry is that those tools will become mainstream, just like it's unimaginable not to have a cell phone in your pocket right now, so a smartphone. It wasn't the case 15 years ago. The same thing will gradually happen to other advanced technologies, such as 3D scanning, drones that will perform periodic scanning, automatically sending data into centralized repository, where it will be automatically processed and categorized, and then delivered in more suitable way to augmented reality devices in the field. So that will be the workflow of the future. And the results that we should expect from that is essentially reduction of delays, reduction of mistakes, because mistakes that we see, they are mostly preventable mistakes. People know exactly what's underground, except somebody made a mistake and forgot that it was there. So once we start deploying more advanced tools that alert people about issues, alert people, automatically detect problems, and deliver it in a new way, as augmented reality visuals, for example, in our case, then we will see dramatic drop in the number of delays and mistakes made in the field, and increased productivity.
Thank you very much. Actually, we will turn back the Q&A session. We have 3 minutes now, and there's no any question. No, actually, I didn't see any question. Maybe I didn't see it. Thank you very much for your participation and this nice conversation and very detailed explanation about the BIM for infrastructure sectors. Thank you.